The Uncharted series, across 4 mainline entries, has consistently gotten bigger. While some would argue that each game's quality is a less linear progression, it's difficult to refute that the spectacle and scope of each title have grown more ambitious than those of the last. Uncharted The Lost Legacy presents a decisive break in that pattern. Originally conceived as an expansion to Uncharted 4 that eventually ballooned into a separate game, this non-numbered, budget-priced entry signals a bold new chapter for the franchise. Does it justify its existence, or is it about time that these treasure hunters hung up their hats?
You're late, Fraser. Nice to see you too.
If there's one element of The Lost Legacy that immediately separates it from its predecessors, it's the absence of Nathan Drake. That's right, the series' mainstay is nowhere to be found this time around, passing the spotlight to Chloe Fraser, the franchise fan favorite who sat out of Uncharted 4. Chloe finds herself in India, on the hunt for the legendary tusk of Ganesh. It's a priceless prize indeed, but also one with which Chloe has a personal connection. To help track down the tusk in such war-torn territory, Fraser enlists the help of none other than Uncharted 4 antagonist Nadine Ross, who's been given the boot from her mercenary group Shoreline. The two must manage an uneasy alliance as they race against Asav, a former associate of Nadine's, who intends to use the tusk to incite a civil war and cause as much bloodshed as possible. Unquestionably, the insertion of a new protagonist contributes greatly to a feeling of freshness in The Lost Legacy. After 4 mainline games, Nathan Drake has earned a rest, and Chloe sticks the landing as his replacement. In many ways, she feels similar to Nate, but manages to continue carving out a distinct identity. Perhaps more interesting is her dynamic with Nadine, a relationship central to the core of the narrative. The two spend most of the game together, providing plenty of time to develop the dyad, although there are certainly many moments where the two would rather be apart. Nadine is a hardened individual, and while she reveals much more definition than she did in A Thief's End, that doesn't change the fact that her morality is painted in many shades of gray.
He changes location and routines by the hour. We'd be foolish to take unnecessary risks.
Let's get one thing straight. This is my gig. You want your share? We play by my rules.
Asav, despite making only a handful of appearances, emerges as one of Uncharted's most memorable villains. His imposing stature is outmatched only by his malevolent intent. That evil ideology and its potential implications lent Lost Legacy's story a greater sense of impact than most other entries. Our anti-heroes may be searching for yet another glittering treasure, sure, but they're also attempting to outdo a warmonger. The manifestations of Asav's hatred contribute to striking imagery that feels distinctly more grounded than what we've come to expect from an Uncharted game. It's a bit of a tonal departure to be certain, but the story of Lost Legacy feels mostly familiar, for better or worse, depending on your perspective.
Indian Army's not messing around.
Narrative isn't the only area where Lost Legacy's familiarity lies. Its gameplay feels equally well-tread, which may delight as many as it disappoints. The expected mechanics remain the bread and butter of the experience, feeling, perhaps unsurprisingly, most similar to Uncharted 4, particularly with regard to combat. You're once again provided with a greater sense of freedom in terms of how you tackle each encounter. Whether the fight erupts into gunfire or remains a more clandestine affair is entirely up to you. In general, it seems like the game wants you to play stealthily, providing myriad tufts of tall grass for hiding, but if you're more inclined for traditional shootouts, that option always remains viable. Gunplay feels every bit as tactile and satisfying as it did in A Thief's End, although it generally feels as though Lost Legacy is a bit less predicated on combat than prior entries. Don't get me wrong, there's still plenty of shooting to be done, but the other gameplay types here adopt more central roles. Whereas I'd call the other Uncharted games third-person shooters, Lost Legacy feels a bit more like a general action adventure. I don't have any stats to back up this perception. It's entirely possible that there are just as many combat encounters here as there have ever been, but it feels like you spend just as much time making daring leaps as you do scoring headshots.
Thank you.
This is a good thing, as it allows Lost Legacy to carve out a more distinct identity. Perhaps its most daring departure is Chapter 4, a section of the game that presents the largest explorable space ever seen in an Uncharted title. A Thief's End occasionally gave the player more free reign in some semi-open spaces, but they're small by comparison. This new section outfits you with a car and provides 3 objectives that can be completed in any order that you choose. This flexibility encourages exploration as you navigate with a diegetic map across the open landscape. There's even compelling side content for those willing to stray far enough from the golden path.
Well, will you look at that?
Monkeys.
You seem excited.
I like monkeys.
None of this is noteworthy in general, but it's genuinely exciting to see Naughty Dog experiment with giving the player so much freedom. Once this section is complete, the game returns to its more traditional, linear progression, which is for the best, but still, it's interesting to think about what a more open-ended Naughty Dog game could look like in the future.
Think we've lost them. She who fights and drives away lives to fight another day.
Regardless of which of the game's 9 chapters you're in, prepare to ascend some truly awe-inspiring landmarks. Uncharted has this stuff down to a science at this point, and I know some may view this sort of on-rails platforming cynically, but I'd argue that it's never been more engaging, especially given that Chloe is equipped with the grappling hook and piton introduced in Uncharted 4. Given her insane feats of upper body strength, Chloe and Nate must have a similar workout routine. What Nate doesn't have is a hair clip, a tool deftly used by Fraser to pick locks, enabling access to some high-grade weapons and explosives. One definitive constant in Lost Legacy is its stellar presentation. It almost feels redundant to lavish more praise on the graphical merits of this series at this point, but the technical prowess on display is undeniable. India is a beautiful backdrop, and while some of the environments feel a bit disappointingly similar to A Thief's End, the overall package remains extraordinarily impressive. The scope of Lost Legacy is pretty remarkable for a budget release. It's far shorter than Uncharted 4, but gives Uncharted 1 a run for its money, while presenting a far more varied and engaging journey. Lost Legacy brings out the big guns with a final sequence that rivals anything else in the franchise. This all brings us back to the central question of this video. What was the point of Uncharted The Lost Legacy? Well, it's more Uncharted goodness to be certain, and a chance to provide more finality for one of the franchise's most popular characters, but it seems reductive not to dig a little deeper. Who's to say exactly what Naughty Dog's intentions were, but Chloe's final outing makes a strong case for the value of the budget release, for the game that doesn't need to take more than 8 to 10 hours to complete. The modern video game industry feels more and more predicated on massive blockbusters intended to provide dozens of hours of content. I welcome such value-rich experiences as much as the next gamer, but too many of these humongous titles in a row can result in serious fatigue. That's not even to mention the massive development costs associated with these big AAA releases, with various PlayStation studios becoming some of the most public examples of developers spending hundreds of millions of dollars on a single game. That's not to say that Lost Legacy wasn't a massive and expensive undertaking to create, but after playing it, it's difficult not to question if more, shorter experiences from the developers we love may help mitigate the risk associated with such expensive development cycles, all while smoothing out the long droughts between a studio's releases. This is a much larger conversation with no simple answer, but regardless of how it unfolds, it's undeniable that Uncharted The Lost Legacy is a supremely satisfying, bite-sized adventure and acts as, for now at least, the fitting final chapter of this legendary series.
Nice work, partner.
Nice work.
Put her there. Jesus! What was that? I'm really embarrassed for you right now.